150 reasons to secede from the Union for those who are considering secession. Politics is much like a basketball game played in the neighborhood. There's one kid who owns the ball. That's you. The ball represents anything of value, and the ball can make a game. Whoever owns the ball controls the game. If the kid who owns the ball isn't very smart or is easily bullied, then anyone can control the ball. The people have their labor and their vote, and that symbolizes the ball. Because if we took the ball, that is, we took our labor and our vote and we left the ball game, there wouldn't be any ball game. That's the power the people have. They took your labor from you in 1913 with the enactment of the IRS law, and the way that law was written is not the way it's enforced today, and the way that law was ratified was not legal. And if you try to do anything about it, you find out how powerless you are. They took your ball. What we need to do is take our ball back and go home. Game over. Because I don't feel like we got picked to be on the team. The game is over. It's called secession. States secede from the Union, and many of them are talking about it. The citizens simply say, "My state is out. We are no longer part of the fascist Nazi system. We're going to take our basketball and go home. And as long as we have the ball, I'm sure we can find other kids to play with. And we don't need those who forgot that we own the ball." Secession is powerful. It's like owning the basketball. You don't want to pick me for a team? I don't want to play. Now give me my ball because I'm going home. When you make this threat, what do? For the first time they realize that without your ball, there's no game, and they beg you to stay. And they start making concessions to you. "We'll put you on the team." Oh, now they want me to be on their team. How nice. No thanks. Just give me my ball. I want to go home. When concessions don't work, then they tell you, "We'll bring you the ball after the game is over." No, I don't think so. Give me my ball. I'm leaving. When persuasion doesn't work, they threaten you. So you call the police and the cops hand you your ball and you go home. Without the ball, there is no game. And if they don't want to include you in the game of politics, you simply take your ball and go home. Game over. I advocate secession. States quit the Union of Socialist States of the Republic, USSR, and they secede, taking their basketball home with them. That effectively dissolves the federal government and leaves all of those government employees without a job, including the Kenyan with his fake birth certificate and very expensive vacation habits. The people can close down this freeloading in a hurry. Everybody's talking about cutting spending in government, but nobody has any means. What you do is you throw out everything and you bring back only what you want. We quit, and that's the end of that system. Then we form a new system, starting with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and then we add back the laws that we want. And guess which two are not there anymore? The IRS and the Federal Reserve. Poof, gone. The simplest way to get rid of them is secession. They want to give us two bad choices and put a gun to our head and say, "Pick one for puppet president, Obama or Romney." If we quit the game and leave Romney and Obama behind, they get the best two candidates and we get the unelectable one, Ron Paul. Well, maybe he would be electable in our system, the constitutional one. We'll have him run against Dennis Kucinich. Now instead of having to pick between the lesser of two evils, we have two constitutional candidates to choose from, and already we're better off. We can close down the former United States that went bankrupt and open up the next day sans the Kenyan, the CIA, the Federal Reserve, and the IRS. The new republic begins with the Constitution and some laws that have been filtered through the Constitution test to see if they qualify. When you get on an airplane, we're not looking for terrorists. We left them behind in the old government. We know who did 9/11. They're not invited to the new country. We'll set up the new country in a modern way without representatives. Nobody has to ride 3 days on horseback. We'll use the internet. Why do we need representatives who don't represent us? We'll set up a transparent system, not a secret one. Government will answer your questions, not deny you answers to legitimate questions about 9/11, for example. We won't have any costly wars unless directly threatened. Inventors who were denied their rights to their free energy devices will find the new America inventor-friendly, accommodating, and prosperous. Parents will never be told that they have to accept government inoculations, and so nobody has to wonder what's in the drugs they're giving us. In the new society, when you own your house, you really own your house, and no more secret funds that are hidden from the people. Whenever I present a new idea for consideration, I always like to ask this question. If we already had a system whereby the people represent themselves, would you like to return to the corrupt system whereby you have a representative who doesn't represent you? A representative who has been bribed, blackmailed, hypnotized, coerced? Do you want to return to a government that murders its citizens without due process of law? That's how you accept change when you have a natural resistance to change. Just imagine that you already experienced the change and you're considering going back. It's very clear that you don't want to go back to a system where your government murders its citizens without due process of law. That is clearly wrong. How many Americans would vote for a government that murders its citizens without due process of law? Nobody! Nobody would vote for such a crazy idea. Yet that's what we have today. And that's one good reason to secede. If you think the role of government is to keep the public in constant fear for the purpose of control and intimidation, then you have no reason to secede. If you think the role of government is to make the public fearful of government and governmental bodies such as the IRS, the NSA, the EPA, the CIA, and the FBI, then you have no reason to secede. If you think the role of government is to subdue the people, control them, and track every move, then you have no reason to secede. If you ever got away from this system that we have, would you voluntarily go back to it? If you think the role of government is to use fear to coerce the populace to file tax returns which are not required of Americans working in the USA, earning wages and salaries here at home, then you have no reason to secede. Did we get by for over 100 years without an income tax? Reagan found that 100% of the money you pay the IRS goes to pay interest on the national debt. He revealed their secret and they shot him. They may have shot him before he revealed the secret. John Hinckley was a close friend of the Bushes. George Bush had a meeting with the Hinckley family the morning Reagan was shot. And the Bush family went through a lot of trouble to keep that a secret. After Reagan was shot, he behaved himself. After Kennedy was shot, he also behaved himself. He was dead. I think Hinckley was a hypnotized assassin like Sirhan and Andy Pero. We know with absolute certainty from Andy Pero's testimony that the CIA trains assassins, hypnotizes them, and then programs them to forget who they killed or why. The Andy Pero story is a must-read for every American. To understand what's going on in this country today, you must read the Andy Pero story. You must read the Bryce Taylor story. These are only two kinds of slaves that they train against their will. In a free country, if you think it's the role of the secret government to make an attempt on the life of Ronald Reagan or to murder other presidents when they reveal the findings of the Grace Commission report, then don't protest and don't secede from the Union. Enjoy the IRS slavery and the interest charged by the Federal Reserve. Sit back in your easy chair and pretend that the empire is crumbling, while Obama signs yet another executive order like a Latin American dictator. If you think it's the role of government to tell you what you can do with rainwater that falls on your property, then you have no reason to secede. But if you want to do what you want to do with the rain that falls on your property, then join us in this secession movement. Tell 10 people every day. If you think it's the role of government to use public resources for the benefit of a few at the expense of the many, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to confiscate your guns when you need them most, then you have no reason to secede. If you think the role of the CIA is to kidnap children and import illegal drugs like heroin, then you have no reason to secede and cut off the funding for the CIA and reduce the crime in America. If you think it's the role of government to exploit the population in every way possible while telling the people it's just the opposite, then you have no reason to secede. If you think the role of government is to make sure that schools do not produce intellectuals because intellectuals are trouble, they think too much, and they create problems for dictators, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to use the CIA to murder those who are enemies of the secret government, then you have no reason to secede. Go along to get along. If you think it's the role of government to use the FBI to confiscate videos to cover up crimes, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to use the IRS as a weapon to audit enemies of the totalitarian regime, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's government's role to provide food stamps to poor families who were made poor by the actions of the government in the first place, then don't secede. If you think it's the role of government to control the press and other media so that the public is never informed, but instead disinformed and misinformed, and the valuable media is used exclusively as a propaganda device to control the thoughts and actions of the population, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to delve into the conflicts of other nations whenever and wherever there's an opportunity, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to murder U.S. citizens without due process of law, you have no reason for secession. If you think it's the role of our government to make wars everywhere possible in order to make the defense contractors wealthy and drain the people, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to be the world's policeman, invading sovereign nations when there's a chance to take over their lucrative oil fields or poppy fields, to expand the nation's influence wherever possible in the region, even when, and especially when, our nation can't afford it, and we have 50 million Americans receiving food stamps just to survive, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to make sure that the Constitution is weakened, contradicted, omitted, neutralized, overlooked, ineffective, and rendered obsolete, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to set up a wealth transfer system in which earnings from the bottom level, where the wealth is created, moves up to the top levels where it is spent by the privileged few, then you're perfectly happy with this system and there is no reason for you to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to blame capitalism when socialist ideas fail to provide prosperity to the people, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to place shills in demonstration crowds in order to hijack peaceful protests, misrepresent the protesters, discredit those with real grievances with their government, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to create disturbances which can be blamed on the peaceful protesters and deny them redress for their grievances with government, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to deny protesters their constitutional rights, brutalize them, and drive them from public places where their protests take place, you have no reason to secede from the Union. If you think the role of our government is to create an American empire by invading sovereign nations, robbing their natural resources, and occupying them for decades, then you must love Adolf Hitler, and you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to create huge bureaucracies that waste the confiscated wages of the citizens, you have no reason for secession. If you think it's the role of government to create health organizations for the purpose of ensuring that no one is healthy, then you have no reason to secede. If you agree that the role of government is to print money and cause inflation so that the value of the lifetime savings of the citizens are eroded and prices are forever spiraling upward, then you have no reason to secede. If you think the role of government is to put down protests with batons, brutality, intimidation, arrests, and jail time, then you have no reason to secede. If you think the role of government is to make sure that the people have no avenue to redress their grievances with government, then you don't need secession. If you think it's the role of government to create government agencies like the NSA and the CIA, which are responsible for the assassination of foreign leaders who were democratically elected, and the assassination of anyone else who opposes the plans of the powerful elite, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to intimidate citizens, governors, states, cities, and law enforcement so they comply with the oppressive and unconstitutional laws, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to carry out terrorist acts so that people think that they're being done by outside Muslim groups and others, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of the government to create a boogeyman to scare the citizens into supporting wars, invasions, and domination of other countries, then you've got to be real happy with what we've got now. You have no reason to secede. Is it the role of our government to touch the genitals of our citizens under the guise of protecting them from terrorists who we now know to be in the government? Should our government be touching our genitals and demoralizing us, preparing us for the coming totalitarian state? If that's the role of government, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to put out propaganda so that the people are fooled by illusion, and the young people enlist in the military and believe that they are actually fighting for their country, serving the people, dying in wars, seeing themselves as heroes, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to make sure that every dead soldier gets a flag on his coffin, to keep up the illusion of heroism, while heroin is being grown, harvested, and produced in foreign countries so that it can be sold on American streets, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to destabilize countries which have oil reserves, take them over and occupy them so the Queen can sell us gasoline at $4 a gallon, then you have no reason to secede. Maybe you think it's our government's role to seize free energy inventions and free us from the Queen's monopoly on oil. I have a better idea. Tell the Queen to fight her own wars and stop sending us the bill, $2 trillion a war. We quit. We're starting a new country without you. The Queen owns Washington, D.C. She owns the land under the White House. She uses American troops to invade countries so she can have the oil. and then the American people get the bill. If that sounds right to you, do nothing. Because you obviously think that it's okay to channel the profits from drugs and oil to the elite so they can spend it, and to send us the bill for those wars to maintain those poppy fields in Afghanistan. I don't see it that way. I see a reason for us to secede. I see 150 reasons for us to secede. And some Americans agree. Is it the role of government to put out disinformation to confuse the citizenry and make them believe that up is down and wrong is right? If so, then there's no reason to secede. Did our government plan to be inefficient and create huge bureaucracies? And why should we continue? Let's quit and start over. It would only take one day for all of us to say, we quit, we're done, we're forming a new union of 50 states, and we're forming it without you guys and your laws. You guys take your laws and take a hike. We have no confidence in you. It's over. We don't agree with you kidnapping citizens, forcing them into risky and life-threatening experiments so that the methods are discovered to control the minds of the population so that they serve you better. We don't like that idea. We're going to quit and start over, and that idea is out. And so are you. You, the controllers. You, the slave masters. We don't think it's the government's role to murder children, American children, in government experiments like Montauk. We know about it, we don't like it, and it's time to secede. We don't think it's right for government to murder journalists who enter the battlefield at great risk with the intent of bringing us the truth. WikiLeaks showed us what you do to them. We don't like it, we don't approve, and we want out. Secession is a simple way to achieve it. Those helicopters belong to the people, not you. We're taking the helicopters and the planes, and the military goes with us. We don't think that the role of government is to corrupt every aspect of government and make sure that each serves the interests of those who are at the top and in control of the puppet president, Congress, the Supreme Court, and the slaves. And so we vote for secession. It's clear that the government controls the judicial system so that judges convict those who do not pay the illegal IRS, which is not part of our government, which demands payment without any law on the books to give them rights to these seizures, to use county sheriffs who commit the felonies of taking the property of citizens, and not to answer to anyone who asks for the law or the right of others to know where the authority comes from. The IRS alone is reason enough for secession, and we have waited far too long. Oklahoma City was an inside job, just like 9/11. Timothy McVeigh was hypnotized, just like Sirhan Sirhan and Andy Perro and Bryce Taylor and Larry Solars, Andrew Basiago. All of these people came forward to report about how they were tortured, their minds were split, and they were told to forget. But some of them remembered anyway. Some of them revealed that there were terrorist acts carried out against the people of the United States and other countries. And based on this, we have the grounds for secession, the reason to secede, and the duty to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to pass out free money to countries like Israel, who was caught killing U.S. sailors on the USS Liberty, and we know that our president swept the incident under the rug, he hushed it up so that Israeli friends were not offended by the story. And the aid to Israel continued. The $6 billion they had to pay was paid out of money we gave them. $20 billion a year. This is a fact, and it should be known by everyone. I love the Jews, but I hate this incident with the USS Liberty. I do not condone it, even if the people are my favorite. Murder is not acceptable. I don't think it's the role of our government to pass out free money to Israel or any other country when we have to borrow it from China. We can't afford to borrow money from China and pass it out to anybody free. And as long as this government does that, I have a reason to favor secession. I don't think it's the role of government to confiscate the precious metals of the citizens whenever it's convenient, like Roosevelt did. And if my government does that, I want to secede. I want a government that does not confiscate the precious metals of the citizens. If you think it's the role of government to cause high unemployment and then not count all the unemployed in the unemployment figures and report lies to the public, to cast the leadership in better light, if you think this is right, you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to cause depressions and then buy up the most valuable properties and businesses at bankruptcy prices, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to run guns to those who are dealing U.S. drugs in foreign countries, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to provide arms and supplies to both sides in a war so that someone in government can make a killing off the bloodshed, you have no reason for secession. If you think it's the role of our government to gain control of everything step by step, inch by inch, you have no reason for secession. If you think it's the role of our government to render our currency worthless, discourage savings, and undermine investments, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to confiscate money from those who earn it and pass it out to those who vote for a particular party or pass it out to those who are friends of those in government, then you have no reason to complain and no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to conceal the activities of government by compartmentalizing them and declaring them classified, then you have no reason to secede. But I favor cutting off all those funds to all those agencies. And there's no way to do it through the election process because they rigged the voting machines. You'll never get your candidate elected. You'll never get any candidate who wants to return to the Constitution. You'll never get any candidate who thinks we should have fewer wars or less spending. The only way you can achieve those things is secession. We have no other choice. There is no other door open. Secession makes sense. If you think it's the role of our government to train some military personnel to be unaware assassins, carry out terrorist attacks on people at home or abroad in programs like MKUltra, Super Soldier, Super Warrior, Montauk, then you have no reason to secede. And you have plenty of reason to keep funding these programs. They're all continuing to this day. And the only way to cut off all of the funding is to secede. If you think it's the role of government to send some of those hypnotized people into the future, like Andrew Basiago, to learn about the future events, to use them for their own advantage against the people, then you have no reason to secede. Keep working your job and keep paying the IRS so they can have plenty of money to cheat us out of everything. But for me, the cage is closing in. I'm getting claustrophobic. I feel there's a need to do something. And secession is a nonviolent way of firing everybody and canceling all unconstitutional laws and putting an end to all government agencies in one fell swoop. Secession. They pushed us into this. Larry Solars tells about traveling in time, going back to the past, like the Civil War, to murder land barons from 130 years ago in a Super Warriors program because the CIA wanted to wind up with his large estate. He owned 1,000 acres and they killed him. The aliens tell us that time is not linear like we think. And they took Billy Meyer to various times in history, past and future. And if you're unaware of it, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means you're unaware of it. Now, if you think it's the role of government to use the profits from such murders of land barons in order to finance black op projects, then you have no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of government to wage campaigns to discredit those who tell the truth and report the facts to the public, harass them, intimidate them, sometimes murder them to keep them from acting on their knowledge, then you're perfectly satisfied with government and there's no reason to secede. If you think it's the role of our government to murder scientists who make discoveries that might put profits at risk of some lucrative rackets, then you don't want a government, you want to belong to a mafia in which you have no role except to produce wealth for the mafia. You don't need to secede. If you think it's the role of government to restrict the freedoms of the people any way and every way possible, and to never stop looking for ways to curb freedoms or place more restrictions on the populace, then you've got to be happy with this system, and there's no reason for you to secede.